it's just kaput, it's finished. So we have ruined these state-owned entities because of ministerial. Now, one can say that that happened with a corruption hat on under Jacob Zuma. Of course, a lot of it did. But even to this day, for instance, the Road Accident Fund, it is a very complex matter. We will never fix it when we appoint people who just have no idea about the complexities of this issue, sitting in the driving seat at the Road Accident Fund. And the same thing is said for armaments manufacturing, for airlines and so forth.
Hello, my name is Donald, and welcome to the #1 media company, WorldView. At WorldView, we explore everyone's perspectives on all things that can broaden our worldview. Today, we're talking with Wayne Duvenage. Wayne is a South African businessman, entrepreneur, and civil activist. He is currently the CEO of the South African corruption-fighting civil action organization, the Organization Undoing Tax Abuse, OUTA, involved in fighting corruption and maladministration across all spheres of government in South Africa. So Wayne, good afternoon. Welcome to the show. So Wayne, tell me a bit about yourself. What is your story and how does it fit into your book that you have authored, The Eat-All Saga, A Journey from CEO to Civil Activist?
Well, I spent a number of years in the corporate field, working my way up through the ranks at Avis, the car rental company, and eventually became the chief executive officer of the car rental division. And that was in about 2007 and filled that role to about 2012. And I really enjoyed myself and the role that I played there, especially as the CEO, when you have a lot more say in what happens with the company's strategy and driving that strategy, by the way, through the executive team. And we became well renowned for our sustainability journey, carbon neutral journey, and our service excellence program, which we rolled out throughout the company. So did that for 5 years, and then government's decision to introduce a very irrational, very expensive, very cumbersome and inefficient e-tolling scheme, which had all the hallmarks of corruption, were trying to be forced onto society. It was going to impact heavily, by the way, in our business. And I took a business view initially around why government had introduced something that they hadn't consulted with society on, certainly not the business industry players. We were the biggest buyer of cars in the country at the time. And we knew nothing about this plan. It was going to impact on our business. And so with that as the kernel and the start of our challenge against SANRAL, we did research. I was also chairing the Car Rental Association, SAVRALA at the time, when we decided there was something fundamentally wrong. This scheme was going to fail, and people don't want to live in a country where government cannot enforce its own laws. It was going to become a user pay scheme where not all the users pay, and that in itself was a problem. So long story short, we decided to challenge that. I headed up that challenge, headed up the organization. At the time, OUTA was known as the Opposition to Urban Tolling Alliance. That's where it got its initial acronym. And lo and behold, this thing got a life of its own, and it needed full-time management. And I decided, having been in the corporate travel and tourism space for some time, it was time to change, time to do something different, although I didn't see this as the long-term journey for me. It was going to be a temporary journey as we tried to get government to come to its senses on a very poor decision. And lo and behold, government doesn't shift very often. It doesn't shift its positions in a nature like this. And so it needed a bigger force, and that's how OUTA was born. So it's been quite an interesting journey for me. So that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah, before we move on to OUTA, just out of interest's sake, I see on your Wikipedia page that you were born in Zimbabwe. Why did you leave Zimbabwe?
Well, I was 5 years old at the time in 1965. I think my parents decided to come down to South Africa. I think it was in the year or around about the time that Ian Smith was declaring a unilateral declaration of independence. I'm not sure exactly what their motives were, but they relocated to South Africa and brought my sister and I down with them. Obviously, we were children. And I've grown up here. I've never known myself to be a Zimbabwean. My residency here is here. My citizenship is here. So yeah, this is home for me.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you, how does the Zimbabwe of today compare with when you were there? But obviously, if you were 5 years old, you don't have much of a memory.
Nothing.
So, OUTA, what is the organization Undoing Tax Abuse? What is it trying to achieve?
Well, initially it set out to bring a halt to this very irrational decision, this policy of government, which had put into law to say we're going to tax you for the use of urban roads, and a very elaborate scheme. And as we set this up, and it took a lot of turns, the first 4 years, it was an entity that was really funded initially through business to fight a legal case. Government lent on business, made them stop supporting OUTA. And we were left high and dry with millions of rands of bills to lawyers who fought a very expensive case. By the way, it cost us a lot more than they told us it would be. And we had to change tack. The initial change in our strategy was to say to the public, look, this is your fight. We can't fund this as individuals. It needs to be funded through a crowdfunding platform. And on top of that, we can't fund it with one-off donations. We needed people to commit to a long-term fight that was going to have to build up a litigation war chest that was going to see an end to this e-toll matter. And the way we were going to do that is through the Supreme Court ruling that allowed a collateral challenge. In other words, if anybody is found not guilty of defying an irrational law, well, that would be the precedent for all people to stop paying for a scheme that was I don't know what they were thinking when they put this thing together, but it was never going to work. And we found that if citizens cannot participate in government's laws, it's an irrational law. If government makes it difficult, and there were many examples of it. So we set out on this journey to say we will defend every single individual who is summoned for non-payment of e-tolls, so long as we have the funds to do so. And Sanral became our biggest sales rep, sales initiative, because every time they sent out summonses, the people were panicking. It was headline news, and so a lot of people started to support us. And that was in 2015, 2016. And as that journey started, we were still focused on ending e-tolls. We started to get a lot of questions from the public around why just e-tolls. There's so much corruption, and Kandla was headline news. State capture, although not known in 2016 as state capture, was unfolding. And we were asked by our supporters, go beyond e-tolls and let's start tackling government in its corrupt ways. There were other NGOs doing similar stuff like Corruption Watch and Accountability Now and others, but we wanted to do something different. We didn't want to be a typical NGO. We wanted to become an entity that could challenge government, hold their feet to the fire, and start laying charges and doing things a little bit differently. Civil activism unusual, we call it. And while at the same time applying good governance and business processes and systems, and build a team that wasn't reliant on volunteers. It was reliant on employing people at market-related salary specialists. These are project managers. These are legal specialists, investigators, communication specialists. And so we set out on that strategy in 2016, kept the acronym, which was well known out at the time, and really made the words to tie into, changed our memorandum of incorporation and broadened our capacity and mandate to start tackling corruption and maladministration of taxpayers' money, and irrational policies and so forth. And look, there's no textbook on this. This is not like opening a restaurant or a hotel. We had to invent our strategy as we went along. And the one fundamental difference to what we did was we employed our own legal team, our team of lawyers, project managers that understood law. And the reason for that is we knew that we were going to have to tackle people through our strong legal system. And we were going to do that by not wasting money on these big law firms that promise the earth and cost the earth, and build cases quick and cheap, with our own teams, using small law firms and using legal counsel that could do so at a discounted rate to assist society in fixing this country. And that's been the gist of our formula, which has worked very well for us.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but e-tolls were only implemented in Gauteng.
Yeah.
Oh,
They
why?
tried to implement it in the Western Cape. They used a lot of the arguments that we presented, and they won their case in Cape Town. And the reason why they won it is we lost on a technicality. We had come too late. The roads were built and the money had been borrowed. Fortunately, in the Western Cape's case, the money hadn't been borrowed yet, the roads hadn't been built. And so using the rationale that we applied, the city of Cape Town were able to stop it in its tracks. And in fact, found SANRAL wanting in a number of areas in their weak public engagement process and breaking of the law, quite frankly. And that was the end of e-tolls in any other city. And it was also the demise and the start of the demise for e-tolls in our city here in Gauteng.
So e-tolls are one example, but what are some other examples of serious examples of how the state are using taxpayers' money to loot? And how is OUTA involved in tackling these issues?
Well, I don't have to tell you, the state-owned entities are filled with corruption. And what we did was start to expose how the state had revalued the assets in order to borrow and give government guarantees again to lending houses in order to borrow money. And that's how Eskom got into the debt it is, SANRAL, Denel, Transnet, and so forth. So what we did was started to gather evidence, use the Gupta leaks. We had a copy of the Gupta leaks and had to start laying charges. But ours is a multifaceted and multi-pronged approach to challenging corruption and maladministration. It's about, for instance, we took Duvenage on at the time. Jacob Zuma had hijacked the NPA process with Sean Abrams, who was a stooge in heading up that process. So we said, well, we'll lay a civil case against her and have her declared a delinquent director. It took us 3 years and 5 million rand to do so. Just to show how the SOE should be doing this, and it's a precedent-setting case. And we're now putting various boards and various entities within the state under pressure to do that work. They shouldn't have to wait for civil society to do it. We stopped the BNP Capital case from happening. It was a boutique finance house that Duvenage was trying to shoe in to SAA to earn about 249 million rand for zero work done, because it was work that was done by the airline itself. We stopped 1.8 billion rand from leaving the country by interdicting the Bank of Baroda, who was handling the mine rehabilitation funds on behalf of 2 mines that the Guptas owned. And so the list is quite long, but we identify cases and matters that we can hold government's feet to the fire. We've done hundreds of them, by the way, some of them very quick, some short. We recently halted the launch of OUTA, another big failed administrative system that government's trying to roll out, not in the best interests of society. We've been making submissions to the Department of Transport to lengthen the validity period of driver's licenses, and we are challenging all the additional fees and additional taxes that come to play. So, I can go through quite a number of things. We assisted SAFC and EarthLife Africa in a communication strategy to bring an end to the nuclear deal that was taking place in 2016, 2017. This is with Rosatom and Zuma. So it really comes down to us working with whistleblowers, identifying corruption and maladministration, and then engaging with the powers. And we've got a 5-step methodology. Works quite well. Before we don't shoot from the hip, we do thorough investigations to establish what the issue is, whether it is substantive, whether it's real. And then we engage with the powers, the National Lottery Commission, a lot of corruption happening there. So once we engage with the powers, we give them an opportunity to explain themselves. And if they don't rectify the situation, then we go after them, we expose the issue, and we start mobilizing other sectors of society. We protest if we need to, and then we go to court. We're always prepared to go to court on most of our matters if there's no change in behavior.
Wayne, in a recent interview, you mentioned that the state often uses bullying tactics to stifle your organization. Can you give us some examples of how they implement it?
Yeah, the one that I'm personally familiar with is the e-toll matter. After business had indicated their clear support for this car rental, for the e-toll challenge. And as I said, I was chairing the Car Rental Association at the time. All their members were agreed to support the fight against e-tolls. The minute I had left Avis and wasn't no longer chairing that entity, government lent heavily on those businesses. So the Barloworlds of the world, the Imperial Group, Bidvest, who own all the car rental companies, CMH, those entities were lent on by government officials. And by the way, you must remember, on many of these boards sit government officials, government MPs sit on these boards. And lo and behold, within a short space of time, I got letters from all of them pulling out their support for OUTA. And I saw the mails, from Nazir Ali and Sanral to the presidency and to various government departments that were using and procuring services of car rental companies, putting them under pressure to say, pull that business away from these car rental companies if they continue to support OUTA. That is sheer bullying. That is outright arrogance and the wrong way to run a country. And business ran away, business fears. And I've seen it in many other instances where there are opportunities for business to stand up on irrational policy and policies that are affecting negatively the ability to do business in this country. And yet those businesses look away. They are too shy to challenge government because they fear the consequences of audits, of being struck off procurement lists, and other things that they just don't want to. So business is a bit cowardice when it comes to challenging government when they have to, when they should be challenging them. They tend to look away. And sometimes it suits them to look away because they're doing deals with business behind the scenes, and they're enabling business transactions to happen which shouldn't really happen. If you just look at the amount of lending houses that gave money to our state-owned entities at the time, they should have looked closely at the balance sheets of those state-owned entities. They would have seen the inflated assets, the type of stuff that brought Steinhoff down. They would have seen that you cannot realize the value of Sanral's roads in a typical balance sheet transaction because they can't sell their roads. And so Eskom is not selling their power stations, and yet they gave government the money only because government backed those bonds. They would never have given government that money if they were JSE listed companies with no government guarantees, if the risk sat with the lending houses. And this is where business needs to change its act, because they are part of the problem and now they need to become part of the solution.
And the government also applied heavy legal pressure on your organization.
Well, yes. I mean, when they litigate with your and my tax money. And we see this far too often. We see them really continuously defending cases which are unwinnable. And then when they lose, it's our money. We need to try and strive for changes to law that says if you're going to litigate and defend cases that make no sense, then the heads of those departments, those ministers need to start be held accountable and liable for those legal costs. But yeah, it's too easy for government to use our taxpayers' money against civil society when civil society is litigating. And in actual fact, that judgment that was given against us initially, which we got overturned, but it cost us a lot of time and money. Judgments against state, against NGOs that are trying to, not vexatiously, but trying to get government policy to be more rational, is a sad situation. Sometimes the courts get it wrong, and they should never rule against civil society in the way they did with us on that matter.
Practically, how does OUTA communicate with the government? How do these meetings happen?
Well, we write to them, we request meetings, and in actual fact, I think during the Zuma years, the gates were up. There was no way that they were going to engage with us. But recently, we are seeing a different appetite. Government is starting to recognize and understand the fact that we are not the enemy, that we have something to offer. We have solutions. And recently, as we heard in Cyril Ramaphosa's State of the Nation address, he has asked his ministers to start walking hand in hand and reaching out to civil society and engage. And so we've met with the Minister of Transport, we've met with DGs and various departments, we've met with Minister and DPE in the past on SAA and so forth. And that's encouraging because, it's not going to stop our approach to holding their feet to the fire. But it's nice to see that in one sense we can be in court fighting on an issue, and in another sense, with the same minister, we can be across the table talking. So you don't have to always agree, but we can find solutions on various matters in various ways. So it is about reaching out to government and them reaching out to us, and there are many ways we do that. We do it sometimes through Parliament, through our presentations in Parliament. So it's an interesting dynamic, and we've got to be able to play in all those spaces.
What are some of these solutions that OUTA have proposed? I know the one is the fuel levy that would be a better solution than e-tolls. So what are some of those solutions?
Yeah, so the fuel levy was just one example at the time, and although we've also been quite hard on government for this incessant increases in fuel levies, so they've increased those fuel levies by over R2 and 80 cents in the years that we've been pointing this issue out. All we said at the time was a 10 cents from the fuel levy, whether they needed to increase it by that much at the time or not, would have resolved the payment problem for the upgrade to the Gauteng freeway. But other solutions are, recently we have suggested to the Minister of Transport that from our research around the world that we apply a 10-year license validity period, not a 5-year one. And that we tackle the issue of not continuously increasing levies to fuel, but find other ways to restructure the fuel price. The minister has taken heed of that. They're already in talks with the various role players to revise the fuel price structures. When it comes to water and sanitation, we are launching a project called WaterCan, which is citizen science, using citizens to test water quality and put it into a database. Government is very interested in that project, wants to work with us on it as opposed to work against us. And so, many ideas and thoughts, tire recycling, the Rhodesia debacle that happened in 2016. We still have a big problem with tire recycling. So it's not that we got all the answers, but as civil society, I think when we engage with people in the know out there, we're able to find solutions. And for some strange reason, government tends to think that it has all the answers to the challenges it faces, and it needs to reach out more, especially in local government. We are suggesting that there's more zero-based budgeting, that no increases in local government salaries happens under the tough economic conditions, that everyone has to tighten their belts. Bonuses should be paid where the public in every town votes on whether a town deserves a bonus or not, the municipality or not. These are we are the citizens. We should be bought into the rating of our service providers in government, not government rating themselves. They'll always think they're doing a great job. But if you look at the Auditor General's reports, it's the other way around.
Do you regret giving the government the idea of a fuel levy? Because it seems like they have totally gone overboard. And now, I believe now half of the money you pay on fuel goes to the government. So do you regret giving them an idea that they're now using efficiently to steal even more money?
No, not necessarily. Look, we didn't give them the idea. The fuel levy's been around since the apartheid days. Government, and it's a user pay scheme, which is not necessarily a bad one. Think about it. If you are trying to raise taxes to put road infrastructure in, well, the people who use roads are people who drive cars. People who drive cars buy petrol. So there's nothing really fundamentally wrong in using a fuel levy. It's used, by the way, in many countries around the world. But what they should do is ring fence the levy for road infrastructure. The problem with government is that they take that levy, they divvy it out to the various provinces to fix their own roads, and province squanders that money or doesn't manage the road building processes properly. So you might even have a road project which 3 years later has crumbled, or potholes get fixed and then they break up again within a short space of time. So it's not that we gave them the idea; they've always had it. We suggested to them that funding a user pays scheme like an infrastructure upgrade to an urban road infrastructure. This is roads you and I use daily. That's what you go to work with, you pay taxes for. We said that should be funded from the fuel levy. This is not a long distance route that you and I take occasionally to get to Gauteng, I mean down to KZN or to Limpopo, where that's a totally different concessionaire contract. So in urban areas, they need to be funded through the fuel levy. The problem is, as I said, not ring-fenced, squandered. It's like all our taxes, by the way, VAT, PAYE, it all goes into the same pot. And then government balances it out in the areas that are required. Sadly, it's too much of our taxes are wasted.
It seems like you're suggesting that corruption, I mean, we believe that there might be a change of government in 2024, but if you seem to suggest that really corruption is also a local and a provincial problem. So if we don't change the governments there as well, corruption is going to continue being a really serious problem.
Oh, yes, it is. Local government is where it's extremely rife, and local government has its own powers. And what we see when a ruling party like the ANC has cadre deployment, cronyism, and they take the eye off the ball, which is the citizen, ruling for the citizen in the best interest. They pay a lot of lip service to that, but they don't do it. That's when you see absolute waste. And we've seen collapsed municipalities. Collapsed, they are broken, completely broken. And it's not the case everywhere. There are some well-run municipalities that listen to the public and listen to their citizens. So this is fundamentally a problem with the ANC and the way it runs its provinces. And we're not for 1 minute punting politics here, but it doesn't take a rocket science to correlate the way municipalities are run and how they run better in certain parts of the country and how they are not in other parts of the country. So I think what we need to do is tell government to start taking lessons from its own countrywide areas where citizens, where municipalities are well run. And I think what we need to do is to enable the electorate to understand that staying away from voting is the worst thing that you can do as a citizen. You need to vote, and if you don't have any clue of what to vote for, who to vote for, what you need to vote for is strategically. You need to vote for the least bad party. You need to affay yourself with why things work and why things don't work. You cannot keep voting in the same corrupt individuals, and you see this year after year, or election after election, in local government, and these same towns just go deeper and deeper into a hole, and then the citizens keep moaning and they don't know why their municipality is in the state that it's in. It's ludicrous, quite frankly.
Wayne, what is your opinion of the Minister of Transport, Fikile Mbalula? Does he allay your fears that many of these problems are being solved, or what is your opinion of the man?
Look, I think, Minister Mbalula is failing in many areas as far as we're concerned. He took over a year to have the International Air Services, the Licensing Council board or council appointed. That's a sin. We've never had a day until March last year when this council wasn't sitting. It's important to give flights routes and licensing to airlines to operate into and out of this country. The whole licensing matter, the license card matter, there are just too many things. PRASA, under his watch, the R2 matter, the RTMC and the RTIA, these are entities under his wing. We've reached out to them. We want to find solutions to the challenges. We keep getting ignored. So if you add up all of those areas, I would say that Minister Mbalula is a bit of a populist, individual in the way he operates and manages his part of the cabinet and his role in department, and that he needs to reach out more to civil society and his entities in order to find the solutions, because we seriously want to find solutions. But just to keep, we only go to court as a last resort. I can tell you on the OUTA matter, we've been reaching out for a long time saying this is not constitutional, it's not going to work. And still to this day, we are waiting for him and his department to sit down with us and other stakeholders and find the solutions to this issue around road safety. So yeah, I don't have much faith, but I do respect the fact that he is reaching out now. He does engage sometimes, not enough, and that maybe things will change, but I'm not holding my breath.
Isn't the problem also that these ministries are very big, cumbersome, and too bureaucratic, and that the ministers don't really know what's going on? That's one of the problems.
It is a problem. Quite frankly, when a president appoints people who've got no idea of how this industry works, ministers and that, and we understand they've got advisors. They don't have to understand everything about the industry, but they've got to have a big picture understanding. That's when you have the problems that you have in government. And so we have Transnet that is in a mess. We have just too much. We should never have allowed the SAA to fail. It was a world respected, renowned airline. It is defunct now. It is just struggling to fly even local routes. Denel, a world respected armaments manufacturer, it's just kaput, it's finished. So we have ruined these state-owned entities because of ministerial. Now, one can say that happened with a corruption hat on under Jacob Zuma. Of course, a lot of it did. But even to this day, for instance, the Road Accident Fund, it is a very complex matter. We will never fix it when we appoint people who just have no idea about the complexities of this issue, sitting in the driving seat at the Road Accident Fund. And the same thing is said for armaments manufacturing, for airlines and so forth. So, Gwede Mantashe should not be heading up energy. He is stuck. His mind is set on fossil fuels, gas, coal. We need to move on as a country. And I'm afraid we've got far too many ministers who just are out of their depth and who appoint advisors sometimes that I believe are not necessarily advising in the best interests of you and I, the citizen. The citizen is not central to our government's thinking. It is not core, and that's the problem.
Yes, absolutely. Wayne, how does your organization, what is the relationship of your organization with other civil rights organizations like Afriforum and Solidarity?
Yeah, look, it's quite strange that civil society doesn't work more together. And it was one of those things that I was quite surprised about initially when we got OUTA going and started to reach out. And what we found very quickly is that every civil society organization has its own mandates. It has its own boards. It has its own journey that it's on, its own executive thinking, strategies. And it's very difficult, even though you might be fighting the same issue, to even collaborate on a matter because there might be political stigmas attached to various organizations. Or, I'll give you an example. When we were trying to get one letter signed by 5 organizations on, I think it was the tire recycling problem. One of the entities that agreed with our whole strategy on that didn't want to sign it because we had a different position on the carbon tax. Now, we at the time, we believed the carbon tax was not being introduced properly, so we were opposing it, not because we don't believe that we have to fight climate change, but because we believe the carbon tax was not being introduced in the best interests of climate change and society. And so you get these nuances, and if civil society organizations don't always agree on other matters, then they don't agree on matters where they should be working together on. So I term it like it's like herding cats sometimes. It takes days to get civil society to agree on one document sometimes. So we tend to work on our own, all of us in our own lanes, and we engage where needed, and we do so through collaborative entities that are trying to pull society together on certain issues. So we leave it up to the coordinating entities. Ahmed Katrad is one of those foundations. Defend Our Democracy, we're on the advisory panel there. And we tend to find commonality in that space, as opposed to trying to seek support from each other for our causes, because it doesn't always work out that way. So it's quite interesting how it's turned out.
I recently watched a podcast where a person that has a lot of experience working with and running these nonprofit organizations, he's now running for governor of California, he mentioned that there's a lot of problems of egos in these organizations. Yes. Do you believe that? Have you seen that to be a problem? And do you think that's one of the reasons why these organizations struggle to work together?
Yeah. As I said earlier, it's mandates, it's different boards, and it's egos that gets in the way. And that you see the same in the political space, where politicians could be working together on a common agenda, will not, because of egos and their mandates that differ. So it's no different in politics to NGO space. Everybody is also trying to chase the same donor buck, the same rand that donors dish out, and they keep their cards close to their chest, because people don't want to share their ideas in order that they get the funding and not somebody else. So yeah, it's a combination of all of that, and including egos. Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of people are very frustrated with how funds are being looted by the government, and they like the idea of a tax revolt. What is your opinion of a tax revolt, where we literally pay no taxes whatsoever?
Well, the only response I can give to that is be careful what you wish for, because firstly, I don't think it's possible. The only way to get it to happen is that big business has to participate. Remember, most of the taxes are paid over to the government through PAYE, through VAT, through company taxes, and those big taxes and the levies and that are all controlled and paid over, and business isn't going to participate in that, I can assure you. And we've had the discussions, and I'll tell you why. Just imagine for 1 month, 2 months, or 3 months that you can get that right. Just imagine that the ports authorities are not being paid their salaries, that the police are not being paid their salaries, teachers. Just think about how a country grinds to halt, and the anarchy and the chaos that starts to ensue, the lawlessness. And you can't fix that. And some people say, yeah, but you can just set up a trust account, everybody pays into that, and then you can pay the people that you think should be paid. Well, it just doesn't work like that. It's not going to happen. What you need to do is fix government. You don't cut off your nose to spite your own face in saying, well, we're not going to give you the money. Well, that's fine, but then just be prepared for the chaos that ensues because of all the other things. It's not like government are saying, okay, well, that's great. They will still, by the way, use the laws to extract the money out of the banks from those businesses. They'll still pay their salaries. The idea of this notion, it's a romantic notion that if we just go on a tax revolt and that'll be fine. It will never resolve the problem. Having said that, localized and well-structured tax revolts at the local government level, where through a court process, you have the council set aside, you set up the accounts, and citizens get involved in running the town. In other words, you keep paying the electricity bills, you keep paying the water bills, and you start to use the money, not letting it flow through council, so that you as citizens can bring engineers out of retirement and fix the waterworks and fix the potholes. That's a different story. But there's a process to follow, and it's a very good process. And for those types of tax revolts, we are right behind them. And in fact, we're part of some of those tax revolts.
Yeah, I should probably have thought of this before I asked the question, but is it even legal to have this discussion?
No, it's fine to have the discussion at all. It's not a problem, and we say to local government and to councils who are errant and who are running their municipalities to the ground, we will drive tax revolts against those municipalities, but we'll do it using the law.
What is your opinion of Afriforum's paraphrasing the tax revolt proposal, where they said they had a series of demands, and if those demands weren't met, they will start initiating the process of a tax revolt? What is your opinion of that?
Well, in the same response that I gave earlier, I'd love to see how they think they're going to get that right or do it. It's a romantic notion, but it's not doable. And if it is doable, be careful what you wish for. I wouldn't want to live in a country where there's a full-blown tax revolt. I promise you, it's time to get out very quickly, because the chaos that ensues is too ghastly to contemplate.
That's interesting. So the chaos of a tax revolt can only make the situation worse. But
worse, far worse.
Wayne, how can one support OUTA, the organization on doing tax abuse?
So we've got a join now button on our website at outa.co.za. It's very quick and easy. People can go on there and sign up to make a debit order through their credit card, through their bank account. By the way, we also 18A certified, so you can claim your donations back in your tax returns, individuals and businesses. And it takes literally 5 minutes to sign up. And we also say to people who want to give us one-off donations, rather than give us 1,000 Rand a year, give us 100 Rand a month, forego the cost of a hamburger, literally a few cups of coffee. And, you know, some people might think, well, what's 100 Rand going to do? But if all our supporters had that view, we'd have nothing. We wouldn't be able to do what we do. We've only got 45 staff working for us, and yet we make an impact. Imagine what we would do with 100 staff. And so, you know, I think the biggest error is the citizen or the individual who makes the mistake of saying, well, I can only give a little, so I'm not going to give anything. That's the worst thing you can do. Whatever you can give, whether it's 80 Rand a month, whether it's 1,000 Rand a month, and some businesses give us, 5,000, 10,000 Rand a month. They see it as their contribution to fixing this country, and it makes sense for them. That's great. But mainly, we are funded by ordinary citizens, tens of thousands of them giving us an average of 120 Rand a month. And they click on the website, and in 5 minutes, they've got their bank account details loaded in. And it's all, you can change it at any time. You can reduce your amount. You can cancel your contribution. It's so simple, but we need every single cent we can get because we need to grow.
Well, Wayne, thank you so much. I don't want to use up any more of your valuable time. I want to give you one last opportunity to add, plug, or say anything that you want to.
Well, just thank you for the opportunity, for interviewing me and for helping us share our story and get it out there. You know, it's a civil society, and civil activism is a calling. It's high positive energy because we know we're fighting for the rights for a better South Africa. And it's not easy work, but it's work that has to be done. And we've got a passionate team, as I said, of 45 staff who really enjoy coming to work every day to make a difference. And thank you for sharing our story.
Well, thank you, Wayne, and thank you for everything you do and your organization does. To our viewers, please consider liking this video, subscribing, and sharing as widely as possible to help Wayne also with this message. My name is Donald, and you've been watching WorldView.